So Jake Paul is going to fight Gervonta Davis. So I guess the Anthony Joshua fight is off for now. Will this be a good fight against Gervonta Davis? Does Jake Paul even have a chance? And does Jake Paul have the resume to fight someone like Tank Davis? And does this fight hurt boxing or does it help? There's a lot of talk around Jake Paul, and a lot of people will say that he's not credible with regards to boxing. I guess in one sense, Jake Paul does have quite a bit of credibility because yes, he was a YouTuber, but he has fought fighters and he does have some form of a CV. I mean, you have Mike Perry, who is a bare knuckle boxing champion. You have Tommy Fury, who at the very least was a contender. And then you have Julius Caesar Chavez Jr. Of course, Julius Caesar Chavez Jr. was past his prime, but I do believe he was a former world title. So, and then you have a variety of UFC fighters. Now, you can say that they're not credible boxers, but they are credible fighters. Yes, there's a context. They're not boxers and they're past their prime. But being a YouTuber and putting yourself in against fighters, people that can fight, that in itself shows that Jake Paul has a particular mentality. So in one sense, he is a boxer. He's taking it seriously from what I've heard. He's training hard and he's taking calculated risks. They are risks, but they are calculated. So, and another thing as well, and this is something I wrote in my notes, he has taken punches in the ring, particularly against a lot of the UFC competition that he had in the boxing ring. And to us, he passed that test. He didn't just take punches and then thought, nah, I don't want to do this. He kept fighting. Tommy Fury, yes, he lost that fight against Tommy Fury, but he competed. It was a competitive fight, and he did knock Tommy Fury down. Now, the jury is out on how good or how bad Tommy Fury is, but Tommy Fury is a professional fighter. He's a professional boxer. He is someone, to my knowledge, that has dedicated his life to boxing. And he has a professional outfit. Say what you want about Tyson Fury's dad, but he's been in elite boxing camp. So the fact that he's guiding Tommy Fury and he's defending the Fury name to a certain extent, that in itself lends credibility. But again, only time will tell with regards to how good Tommy Fury is. Again, Tommy Fury is very marketable. In terms of his media personality, he's someone that's marketable. He can market fights. He's considered to be good looking. He has a great physique. So he is marketable. But how good is he as a boxer? That question has yet to be answered. So one must ask, why is Gervonta Davis taking this fight? Clearly, this doesn't add to his boxing credibility. And the most obvious answer would be the main reason you would think he would take this fight is for the financial gain. I'm not one of these people that criticize boxers for taking big paydays. Gervonta Davis has, to my knowledge, dedicated his life to boxing. He's dedicated his life to boxing. So if you've dedicated your life to boxing, you've been a world champion, you've had many great performances, and then you see an opportunity to make a lot of money, then why would you not seize that opportunity? It makes a lot of sense. Now, one could say, what about the reputation of boxing? Is he tarnishing the reputation of boxing? That depends on the perspective. If he loses, then that would be really bad for boxing. But I guess from Tank's perspective, it's I think it's important to realize that when you're a boxer, you've got a very short window to make a lot of money. And then even if you transition after your boxing career, it's going to be unlikely that you're going to be able to make that type of money, the type of elite boxing money. So it makes sense that within that short window of opportunity, you maximize your earnings. That makes sense. As I've stated before, in a capitalist society, food, clothing, and shelter cost money. So I think we should be careful with our criticisms of Tank. Also, there could be motivation to get even bigger paydays. However, despite all of this, I think it's quite clear that when we take the money out the equation, Jake Paul has a lot to gain. Because if he loses, well, he's supposed to lose. But even if he has a good performance, this can further build his brand. Not just of a successful multimillionaire, because he already has that, but as someone who is credible or more credible in the boxing context. It's important to define what is credible. The fact that he's gotten in the ring on multiple different occasions lends to an element of credibility. But if there's a scale between 1 to 100, then you would think that if he has a good performance, this would push his credibility even further. And there's some variables in this. The first variable is that I've heard that this is actually not a professional contest, it's an exhibition. So considering that, Tank would approach this differently to a professional fight. That's the variable number one. The second variable to me is, how seriously is Tank going to take this fight? He may take it very seriously. He might want to put on a blistering performance, or he might just see it as, okay, I'll do the absolute minimum, because what can this person do with regards to compete with me? I'm an elite boxer. Even if you credit Jake Paul with being a boxer, he's not considered an elite boxer by any stretch of the imagination. The other variable is the weight. Jake Paul will be much heavier. Could that be significant? Well, he'll have a strength advantage in the clinch. Also, because Tank is a precision puncher, check out the performance against Ryan Garcia. Because he's a precision puncher, he's like a marksman. In theory, you can outwork Tank. And because Tank's a counter puncher, if you don't lead that much, if you leave Tank alone, then he seems to be a boxer that he prefers to counter as opposed to lead. And that might favor Jake Paul with regards to going the distance or suffering minimal punishment. But it looks to me that Jake Paul is very serious, is extremely serious, and is extremely committed to making an impact. And he has made an impact. Let's be honest. The Mike Tyson fight, some would say, was a complete debacle. But if you look at the numbers of the Tyson fight was that it was watched by, I believe, 60 million households. 60 million households watched Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul. Of course, there's two pulling powers here. Yes, there's the pulling power of Jake Paul, but then you have the massive media entity of Mike Tyson. Obviously, Mike Tyson had an absolutely phenomenal career. Not only was he undisputed champion, but he was a ferocious champion. He didn't just win, he won in style. And he was the villain. At that time, he was considered the bad guy. And he has developed his reputation even further post his professional fighting career. He now has a podcast. He's stayed in the media limelight. So you could attribute a lot of that attention to the reputation of Mike Tyson. But then when you fight a legend, you inherit those eyeballs. So 60 million people might have tuned in for Mike Tyson, but by default, they would have also seen Jake Paul. And here's another question. Will people pay? I will discuss this later, but will people pay to see this fight? Will people watch this fight, or will the boxing purists, will they stay away from this fight? Will the general public buy into this fight? It'll be interesting to see what the numbers are and what the figures are. And it will be, because at the end of the day, if people do not buy into it with their money, then they won't make more fights like this. So it'll be interesting to see how big this is. And the Tyson fight, in terms of attention, not in terms of what happened in the ring, but in terms of attention, it was up here. It was like I've won 100, it was like 150. So can Jake Paul keep capturing the public's imagination with these type of fights? The one thing you can say about this is that it's very, very intriguing.